to hear a revolution in talk radio. Liberty Talk Radio, where the critical thinking will defrag your mind of propaganda-ridden viruses induced by mass media news programming. No BS here, just the facts.
And now we present to you America's quintessential iconoclastic anomaly. Wow. In talk radio, your host, Joe Cristiano.
Welcome, everyone, to Liberty Talk Radio, America's libertarian voice, broadcasting from our studio in Tulsa, Oklahoma, to around the world. I'm your host, Joe Cristiano, and this is your antidote to popular talk radio. This broadcast is being brought to you on Monday morning, January 9th, 2015. It is now about 8:04. We're a little bit late this morning, 8:04 a.m. Central Time in what was once known as the good old USA. Folks, it's time for us to take back control of our government now before this bureaucratic, oversized, and self-serving federal government starves us of our property, our freedom, our rights, our liberty. To do this, we must shed conventional thinking regarding our political structure. We need to be revolutionaries in thought, dissidents in action. Only after we recognize what our government is doing to our freedom and our Constitution will we start taking it back. And this program is just about that. During our live broadcast, we invite you to call 646-652-4620. That's 646-652-4620, or toll free 888-773-4496. Before we get started, I'd like to remind our listeners to subscribe to our reminder service by clicking on the subscribe icon on libertytalkradio.com. You'll just be reminded of our next upcoming broadcast. We do not sell your name to anyone or for any purpose. Right? And for those of you who tweet, our Twitter address is @LibertyJoe. Now on to our show. Folks, would it not be nice if we could predict the future? I mean, there's programs about that. There's movies about it, about all these people who can predict the future. They know exactly what's going to happen. They don't make much sense, but it would be interesting. Now, in many cases, we really don't want to know what's going to happen. And with us, I think Americans are especially that way. I know when I talk about economics here in America or economics worldwide, hold on, I think the camera needs to be connected. Okay, and excuse me, and that why? Oh, that's okay. Okay, all right. Yeah, I thought one of our cameras were disconnected, so I was instructing the technician, and he told me to shut up and keep on going. Thank you. Okay, and in many cases, when you bring something up about the future, and it is not something that they want to hear, they seem to take it as a negative connotation, and they say, "Well, I want to remain positive." I want to have a positive outlook. I'm a positive thinker. I don't have negative thoughts, or I don't want negative thoughts interfering with my life. So Americans, for the most part, are adverse to reality. Because sometimes reality is not very pleasant. Sometimes it's very good, and sometimes it's just neutral, and sometimes it could be kind of bad, right? So I think Americans avoid really wanting to know what the future is. And this is why people gravitate toward programs where they are in agreement, whatever that political ideology or philosophy is, because they want to have a positive attitude. If they believe something. Now, when I say believe, that means they don't know. It's a belief system. It's not cast in, not fact, not like 1 + 1 is 2. You don't believe that. You know that. But it's consistent with their belief system. They watch it. They always feel good because all they hear and all they become exposed to are those statements and those ideologies and those sort of predictions which are consistent with the way they want to think, all right? Now, unfortunately, life is not that way. I always enjoy listening to different facets of whether it be political ideology, economics, or whatever. Now, quite frankly, in many cases, I'm not in agreement, and they sort of hack me off. But I learned that the more I'm exposed to the different ideas, that it helps me formulate what reality truly is. Now, for example, we all want to know about where we're going. We like to have sort of a compass, and now we don't know exactly where we're going. No one can tell us exactly what's going to happen word for minute by minute or hour by hour or even month by month. But at least we'd like to know where we are going. Now, of course, if you knew that, if you had a good general idea, you can probably do pretty well. Now, if you could in fact predict the future, well, you'd be a multi-billionaire, probably a trillionaire within a few weeks, because you would know exactly what stock would go up, what stock would go down. You would either buy it long or sell it short, and you do that a few times, and you can multiply your money several times a day. You'd be a trillionaire within weeks. All right. So we don't know that. No one knows that, and we're not talking about that. Let me give you an example of what I'm talking about. You see, basically, if you really want to know where we're going, it's all in the demographics. About 15 years ago, I went to a car auction, and I actually had an auction number and all that stuff. Bought a car that I didn't want, by the way. Anyway, but I was sitting next to this guy, and who seemed to really know what he was doing. A beautiful 1932 Ford four-door sedan rolled up, and it was what is known as an over-restored car. It was a lime green. It was absolutely drop-dead gorgeous. Now, I asked him about it, and I said, geez, I'd never seen that color before, and he told me it's what they call an over-restored. That means this car is in better condition today than it was when it came off the assembly line. It's totally, reconditioned, what they call ground-up restoration, and everything was done to this car to and not only bring it back to its original condition, but improved upon that itself. So the auction, I figured this car's going to go for a fortune. It was gorgeous. I couldn't use the car. I had no place to put it, and of course, you couldn't leave it out in the street, So the bidding came on, and very few people bid on the car. And didn't meet the reserve, and they pushed it off the platform. And I turned around, and then another car came up, and it was a Camaro. I forgot what year it was, but I love Camaros, by the way, but I love all types of cars, quite frankly. But this Camaro was kind of sharp, but wasn't really neat like this 32 Ford, And it went for an extremely high number. I don't recall what it was, but it really blew my socks off how much this car went for, and it wasn't all that great. It wasn't all that great condition, and it sold and rolled off. So I turned around to this guy. I said, excuse me. I said, I'm new to this game. I said, why did that Camaro sell and not the Ford? I said, it would seem to be the reverse. He said, son, this is son because I was younger at the time. I was only 50 years old or so, and he was an older guy. And he said, it's all in the demographics. I had never heard that before. It's all in the demographics. And when you think about it, he was absolutely correct. You see, the people who were there at that time, were not of that era, of the 1932 era. They were of the era of the 1950s and 1960s hot rods. And so the demographics dictated very much what the price of the car would go for, right? And I never forgot that. I said, it's all in the demographics. Well, just the other day, I was reading a book by Harry Dent called The Demographics Cliff. And this is something that I've been talking about, but I want to condense it a little bit more than I had before because I touch upon it almost every broadcast. And I say, where are we going? I say, well, just look the condition that we're in. And the condition that we are in today has very, very much to do with our demographics, all right? Now, back in the early 1900s, we had a tremendous influx of immigrants. Now, these immigrants were relatively young. They had many children, right? They were very productive. They came here to work. They would have dug a hole from here to China if they had to. And so they were incredibly productive. So we had a relatively young society, right? And as a result of having a young society, we had also a very productive society, and a productive society buys things. They buy items, they buy cars, they buy houses, they buy refrigerators, they buy, household goods. Well, back then, people probably didn't buy cars and refrigerators. They didn't have any, but they did buy ice boxes or whatever. And so that stimulated the economy, right? At the same time, we became a manufacturing powerhouse, somewhat by default, because the other countries were always, industrial countries that is, like in Western Europe, were always engaged in war. Now, yes, we engaged ourselves in World War I, which we should never have done. That war was over when we got into it. Don't let anyone fool you. And the same thing with World War II. Don't let anyone fool you. It's the nice war stories, but it doesn't hold water at all. But the wars were not fought here, they were fought there. So when they were fought there, what's the first places they get hit? Factories, right? The productive mechanism within each country gets decimated, and that's what the enemy wants to do. You knock out factories. I remember one of the main targets of World War II that we had on our scopes were the German ball bearing factories. And the logic was that if you destroyed the ball bearing industry, nothing rolled. And I thought that was kind of neat. I would never have thought of that. But all of those productive capacity that they had in Europe, and it was very high at the time before World War II, went down to practically nothing. Right? So we became a manufacturing powerhouse. Now, we would have become a manufacturing powerhouse even without World War II. We would have had a lot more competition, but maybe that would have made us better than we were because we got really, really sloppy. Now, you remember back in the 1950s, if it came from Japan, it was junk, right? And it was good. It had to be made in the United States. However, we had something called planned obsolescence. You see, we had so many buyers because we had young people with families, especially after World War II, buying homes, buying cars. We were buying everything. And since there were no manufacturing capacity, basically around the world, with rare exception, we were the world's manufacturer. So we manufactured like crazy, but we had the luxury of manufacturing what we want in the quality that we wanted. Right? So back then, back in the 1950s, the big buzzword was planned obsolescence. That means you bought a hairdryer, or whatever it was. You bought a toaster, and it was guaranteed to last 1 year. After 1 year, it stopped working. It was actually planned to do that so that you would have to throw it away and then go out and buy a new toaster or a new hairdryer or whatever, a new waffle maker or whatever the case may be. Now, even our cars, as attractive as they were, weren't built all that well. There were a few good cars, but the cars actually fell apart after a while. I mean, I recall when I was young, if someone tried to sell a car with 40,000 miles, never happened. Never happened. 40,000, are you kidding me? Bring it to the junkyard. My friend Frenchie bought a Buick Roadmaster 1952-53 for $100 with a straight 8 engine in it, 4-door sedan. I mean, these times were different. In other words, we had plenty of people working and producing, and we became the world's manufacturing powerhouse. We were a younger nation. It was after the war. We came back. We had the baby boomers. And what happened? People had kids. They bought houses. They purchased everything that went around, for having kids, from buying a house and whatever. And so the world, the U.S. was growing. The mentality in America was one in which we said, well, this is America, we're number one, we're exceptional, of course, and this will go on forever. Unfortunately, that's not the case. You see, everything is a matter of demographics. If you go back even a couple of 100 years, you will find dips and you will find peaks in our economy. And if you trace those dips and those peaks, you'll find that they are consistent with the demographics of the nation. Let me make this very simple. Let's assume for a second that we lived in a village, Forget about the United States altogether. We just live in a village, very, very simple. We're a total agrarian economy. We grow our own food. Now, we may trade amongst one another. I may grow one crop, someone grows another crop, and we may trade and whatever. So, and there's relative harmony within this community. Now, for every old person or old couple, you need to have 4 to 6 young people, because the young people are the ones that are going to have to not only take care of themselves, but they need to take care of their parents. As their parents get older, as I am, as you get older, you don't have the productive capacity anymore. Now, if you live to a ripe old age of 90, someone's going to have to take care of you for 20 years, and that's the younger generation, right? So the village thrives provided they have plenty of children. The children get married, they have children, so they have their backup, so when they get older, they have, But as it grows, you have more people out in the field, producing more crops. Now, I'm making this very simple because it all applies equally regardless of how complex the economy is. All right, now, let's take this same village, okay? Now, the village now has, let's assume for a second, let's make it an extreme example. For some reason, no one has kids. No one has children in that village. Now, the economy of the village of the prior generation was pretty good. People traded in whatever, people had what they needed. You had people out in the woods, trading wood for corn or whatever, and things worked pretty well. So all of a sudden, you have no children. All the people in the village get old. What happens to the economy of that village? Now, you may be thinking to yourself, that's silly. No, it's not silly. I mean, civilizations have died because of that. Civilizations, archaeologists look at this stuff and they say, I wonder what happened. And so much has to do with the demographics of the area, because of something happened. People stopped having children because they had a lack of food, because of the weather changes or whatever, and the civilization died altogether. Now, I'm not suggesting that the American civilization is going to die next week, so head for the hills. Please don't go there, because whenever I talk about this, people go, oh, you're so negative. I'm not negative. I'm positive because I want reality, so I can react to reality rather than rejecting it, right? So in the case of the village where people have no children, the older people can no longer work the farm, they starve to death, the village dies. What happens to the economy? Goes down to basically zero. They have nothing. It's gone, all right? 3,000 years later, they dig it up and they go, geez, there was a village here. I wonder what happened to these people, all right? Well, in many cases, this is what happens. This is what happened on Easter Island, they suspect. They said because they cut down all the trees and they didn't really know how to fish out of the ocean. They didn't have boats or whatever. And they literally starved to death and everyone died. Now, I want to relate that to the economy of the United States. Now, we're not going the same way, but we're going in the same direction. I want you to think about the demographics of the United States today, right? And by the way, I would love someone to call to augment this conversation because my voice is going. It's 646-652-4620. Please, if you're listening in, don't be afraid to call in. Don't be afraid to interrupt. I'd like to hear your take on it. It would help me also, okay? So please, I'm begging you, call in 646-652-4620. All right, now let's look at the demographics that we have today. We have children who have been growing up in a society where things were very plentiful, didn't have to work very hard, right? So they became accustomed to not producing, but to consuming. Children consume, right? When they started getting older into their productive years, they really didn't have to develop any particular skills to any large degree. In other words, it was like being in that village and growing up and never learning to farm, or never learning to forage, or never learning to build anything, right? You become a worthless person in society. Well, unfortunately, our children today grow up, right, and they can't find a job. The government then indebts everyone in the nation to put that kid into college, purportedly because if they go to college, they get a job. Although there's no job there for them, they get a degree in sociology and teaching and, the degree in worthlessness. They come out of college and they're in the same position, only they're in debt $75,000. Now, this kid, right, is going back home because he can't afford an apartment because he doesn't have a job. And if he did have a job, it would be in our good old friendly McDonald's or whatever, or fast food franchise. And not that they're a bad place to work. They're great starter jobs, but you can't raise a family on it. So they wind up at home. Well, now you have this guy at home, with a degree in worthlessness, in debt up to his eyeballs. And of course, he's also been taught that, in order to be happy in this world, you must consume. You don't produce. You don't become, you don't create worth or wealth, but you consume. So he also has $23,000 outstanding on his credit card. And of course, he has this car, which has 0% financing, for 7 years. And of course, he can't make the payments on that either. Now, so he's living at home with his parents, living in the basement. Now, he meets a girl. And the guy says, "What do you do?" "Nothing." "Where do you work?" "I work at the Chick-fil-A or whatever." "You got a degree?" "Oh, yeah, I got a degree in worthlessness." After a while, she learns that this guy's a loser. This guy, has nowhere. If she married this guy, she is going to be paying off his debts for the rest of her life. So what is this girl, if she has a half a brain cell working and she's not in the same position that he's in, what does she do? Right? She goes, "Excuse me, I think I hear someone calling me," makes that one-way trip in the opposite direction. In other words, people are not getting married. And look at the statistics today. People are not getting married at the same level they were before. And those people who are getting married are not having children in the same frequency or the same numbers as we did before. Now, how does this relate? Well, think of the village that has no more children. What happened to their economy? Well, archaeologists can tell you what happened to the economy. It collapsed. It went down. Everyone died. Right? Now, I'm not suggesting that next week everyone's going to die and we're going to collapse, but I just want to talk about a trend. I'm talking about demographics. Right? We no longer have the children, the number of young people coming up to pay for all of the social programs that the government has instituted into the system. And as a result of government intervention, these services are costing, and folks, I'm going to say this, and I can back it up, 10 times what they're worth. 10 times. So we're paying 10 times what something is worth because of government intervention, and yet no one has any money to pay for it. Now, if that doesn't drive you nuts, now let's take the 10 times out, all right? I'll concede, but I can prove it. But let's take the 10, let's say 5 times. Things are costing 5 times more because of government intervention, on these social programs, right? And as a result, people who are coming up through the ranks, the young, productive people who are young but unproductive because they don't have jobs and they have no skills, these are the ones that we are looking toward to pay for people like myself, who was at time young and productive, saved my money, retired, and now I'm one of the few people that has some net worth. Now, I'm not a billionaire, but I'm just saying I have net worth. Young people have no net worth. They start off with nothing. But what's shameful about this, and what tells us we're in trouble, is that the young people have a negative net worth, all right? And we're going to talk about that right after our break. Just hold on, don't go away, and remember, 646-652-4620. Let me hear from you.
You're listening to Liberty Talk Radio. Political talk derived from a historical perspective. Not always palatable, but good food for thought. Pure libertarian talk with host Joe Cristiano. LibertyTalkRadio.com.
Express Test is your go-to company for on-site occupational health testing services. That's right, we said on-site. That means we will meet you at your facility for a free health and occupational safety consultation. Express Test specializes in hearing conservation, respiratory protection, and employee safety. We can help you establish viable programs tailored to your business and employee needs. For your free consultation, call 918-743-2929 or visit us at expresstest.com. That's 918-743-2929 or expresstest.com. Do you find yourself asking, what did you say? Aaron Cristiano of Ranch Acres Audiology has over 25 years of experience helping patients just like you.
Hearing requires conservation. We need to be aware and we need to be responsible for our own hearing health.
Understand more with a little help from Ranch Acres Audiology. Call 918-749-7711. That's 918-749-7711 to learn more. We'd like to thank attorney Constance Squires for her support of Liberty Talk Radio. If you want a comprehensive way to affordably avoid legal issues, call Constance Squires. For a free consultation, call 918-254-9283 or go online at isthyWillDone.com.
This isn't your typical talk radio show. This is Liberty Talk Radio.
It's sort of a predictor of the future. First, I think I need to apologize. I believe this broadcast was posted and advertised as starting at 6 o'clock this morning instead of 8 o'clock. That is my fault. And if you listened in at 6 and said, where the heck is this guy? You were absolutely correct. We were not on the air at 6 o'clock. We did go a little after 8 o'clock because we had to reconfigure everything to get it changed from 6 to 8, and that was a trick in itself. So I apologize for that. So I do hope we have some listeners out there. And if we do, please call in 646-652-4620. Now we're talking about demographics and how demographics can sort of tell us where we are going as a people. Now, of course, our politicians will always say things are fine, things are great. And if you ever notice on television, and I avoid mainstream television like the plague, but whenever everything can be sinking, and there can be 25 indicators that are going down the toilet, and then one is good. McDonald's sold 20 more hamburgers than anticipated. The whole market goes up. Everyone is cheering. Everything is fine. Oh, boy, we thought we had troubles. McDonald's sold 20 hamburgers more than we expected. Everything's great. Why were we worrying in the first place? This is the type of mentality, right, that is going to create a panic situation when things really start turning around and turning bad, right? So we're talking about people who, once you reduce the productive end of society, the younger people who are growing up, those people who with the new skills, with the energy to produce things, and also who have a responsibility to help those people who are aging, like me, aging because they can no longer produce as they did before. I have an occupational health testing company. And 15 years ago, boy, I would be in that trailer in the trucks, and I would be jumping up and down, and I would go from 4 o'clock in the morning till 7 o'clock at night straight through, and carry maybe a sandwich around with me or an energy bar to keep going all day long. I couldn't do that today, right? Well, you needed the younger people, and this is when I was in my 50s, so I'm not talking about when I was in 20. When I was in my 50s and even early 60s, I did this. Now I'm finding a lot of difficulty doing that. I don't have that flexibility. My bones hurt. I can't jump off the truck as I used to. I can't hitch all the stuff up and test all day long without getting feeling hurt or tired. So my real productive years, physical productive years, are probably behind me. Right? However, ahead of me is what I have learned during life, and I can give this to those people, or I can transfer this knowledge to those people who are productive, but maybe don't have the experience. The problem is that when you have people who have no experience, are unproductive, what I have to offer them means nothing because they're not doing anything. Now, they'll yes you to death. They'll say, yeah, that's what I have to do. And they'll go home and play a game on their computer. In other words, we are becoming an incredibly unproductive society per household, or per person, or per capita, or however you want to look at it. Now, what happens when we become less productive, and what happens on the other end? Consumption. When consumption goes down, am I consuming today the same amount that I was consuming when I was in my 30s and 40s? Statistics show that people, families, spend most at the age of 46. That's when they peak out their costs, because they have housing and new cars, and they're finishing their kids through school and all this other stuff. So I don't have any of that. I have no house payment. I have an old car. Now, I'll be honest with you, I can afford to buy any car I want. I want a Lamborghini. I can go out and buy a Lamborghini. I'll be honest with you. I can do that. I drive around in a 1996 Subaru, because back when I was young, the first thing you did was save. If you had something that worked, you kept it. You kept it going. You fixed it. You just kept on going. That's the life that that's the world that I came from. I didn't come from so much a disposable society, although it became a disposable society. I sort of rejected that in a way. So I'm still driving around in a standard shift old Subaru with 283,000 miles on it. Now, so I'm not consuming, right? My house is paid for. A lot of times people say, Joe, why don't you go do this, or why don't you buy that? I don't have an interest in that. First of all, I don't have the energy to do what I was doing before, and I like to do things that interest me. I guess I'm becoming more cerebral as I get older and less physical. And I guess this is what happens as you get older, right? So I am at that point where I'm well past the peak, and the amount that I spend is very, very low. Now, am I productive? Sure, I'm still productive, because I still do all the backroom work and help the marketing and whatever for my industrial health testing company, for my wife's audiology practice, and of course my radio station, right? And that helps. But that pales in comparison to someone who is 45 years old and raising a family. Now, today we have also not only one person working, but we have two people working in the household, and sometimes not only the mother, the father, but also the children contributing to the household. Why? Because everything has become more expensive, and incomes have not kept up with the cost of living. At the same time, incomes are decreasing. Job opportunities are lessening. What does that tell you? Demographically, what does that tell you? What do those demographics tell you? That tells you, if you project it out, if you say, well, next year is going to be better than this year, you should have your head examined. Now, I don't know exactly what's going to happen. I'm not predicting something will happen specifically, but I can say the trend is that we're going to have a more difficult time tomorrow than we had today. Look what's happening in Southern Europe. If you take Southern Europe, if you draw a line right across from Portugal all the way to through Greece, right, and to the Slavic countries, right, and you take that, you'll find that the unemployment rate in that area, and that we're talking millions and millions of people, is over 25%. In other words, their unemployment rate is as bad as it was during the depths of our worst depression back in the 1930s. Today, where everyone's saying, oh, things are getting better, and yet we have half of Europe literally unemployed. Do you know we only have males, the number of males working in the, young people in the workforce, 18 and over, is only 44%. I mean, this is abysmal. This is horrible. This is depressionary. Look at the number of companies that are producing things and pushing it on everyone. Turn on the television. Here's a good example. Turn on the television, all right, and tell me, what do you see and hear the most? The program or commercials? I mean, I'm a channel flipper, all right? Now, I watch very little television, and I shouldn't say very little, but there's very few programs that I do watch. My favorite program, Shark Tank. I'll be honest with you, because I've lent money to people, and I identify with them. Kevin O'Leary, Mr. Wonderful, I tell you, he's my idol. I love the guy, you know. Everyone thinks he's nasty. I think he's funny. But I try to watch programs where I truly learn something. There's a takeaway. But every once in a while when I get jittery, I start channel flipping. And I can't find out what's on the other channels unless I go through the guide and read. Because when I go there, what do I find? A commercial. Everyone in the world is trying to shove something down my throat. And guess what, folks? I'm not buying it. There are more and more products being introduced. There are more and more products being produced, and there are fewer and fewer people buying it. That's what they call deflationary depression. And what's happening is that we have less and less money being transferred from one person to another, right? More and more products. Eventually, people are going to say, we have to get rid of this stuff. Here's a primary example. Look at the auto industry. The auto industry, stop. You can't stop an assembly line. It keeps on going, and it rolls dealers' throats. They say, you want to be a dealer? You're going to take X number of cars per month because they come off the assembly line. We just can't say, hey, you know, there's not much of a demand today. Let's close up the factory. Everyone go home, take a vacation for 2 weeks. It doesn't work that way, all right? So you have these cars, and what are people doing? They have the 4 zeros. I think there's 5, but I can't think of the 5th one, you know. 0 down. Now, if you look at the price of the car, it'll make your blood boil. I went to look at a Mustang. I like Mustangs. I'm a Chevy guy, but I like the new Mustangs. I went to go look at it, right? And I saw one in a showroom. It was a really nice car. I asked the guy how much. He said $48,000. I'd buy a house for $48,000. That's my mentality. I know you can't buy a house for $48,000, but it was like $48,000. Like it was nothing. He says, but no, there's 0% financing, right? For I think it was 6 or 7 years, 0% financing. Now, let me stop right there. What is the probability of me buying that, if I bought that car, and I had a 6-year loan, right, and that I would make every payment exactly on time? Ain't going to happen. There's going to be something where I'm going to miss a payment, even if it's just a matter of, I slipped or got lost in the mail. You miss one payment, and guess what happens? Interest comes due. And the interest, now I bought a mattress at 0% financing because I wanted to see the financing arrangement. That's when you see the real stuff. It was one of these Sleep Number mattresses. And we really needed a mattress badly because our looked like the Himalayas, you know, if you looked at it from the angle. Anyway, so we bought a Sleep Number mattress. The guy says, cash same as credit. I said, it's not possible. He says, it is. I said, not possible. Don't tell me that. It's not possible. I said, okay, I'm going to sign up for it. Let me take a look at it. Well, I got the bill, the first bill, and it came with a disclosure statement. And that disclosure statement was interesting. It says you miss one payment. All the interest comes due on the note 29.99%. I'm being exact now. Big letters, 29.99%. Why? Because people don't have money to buy it. And most people don't make every payment, and they must make more money on the financing than they do on the mattress, impoverishing the people even further, okay? This is the trend. So on the car, you have the car for 3 months, you miss a payment, now you have 5 3/4 years in which you're going to make the payments, and sorry folks, the 0% financing is down the toilet. It's flushed, it's gone. And now you're going to pay not 3 or 4%. The banks are not giving you 0.7% interest, but they're going to charge you 14%. Now that $67,000 or $57,000 or $47,000 Mustang, for example, now is going to cost you $52,000. You see where we're going? And why do they do that? Well, 0% financing, 0 payments for 3 months, zero maintenance for 1 year, all these zeros. There was four or five zeros where in other words, everything is free. Just take this stupid car and get it out of the showroom. We have more coming tomorrow. We'll do anything, but we can't reduce the price. Now, we're going to get a point where people can't do that anymore, where there's going to be more product than there is money or people to buy it, and prices are going to start coming down. Now, what happens when prices come down? Factories make less money. They have to decide, what are they going to make? They say, well, if we keep on producing cars and they start stacking them one on top of the other, the dealer goes out of business, right? They go bankrupt. There's a bunch of cars in the parking lot. We don't know where to put them because everybody else has cars in the parking lot that are piled up, all right? And then all of a sudden they have to reduce the price. When they reduce the price, what happens to their profits? It goes down. When their profits go down, what happens to employment? Goes down. You see what I mean? This is a deflationary depression. This has to occur. I mean, I'm not predicting this doom and gloom, but it is doom and gloom because we are going to start seeing this probably sometime this year, where we're going to start seeing this. We see the pressure now. We know the pressure is on for now. Just turn on the television. Buy it now, free. Buy one, get one free. They can't get rid of the stuff fast enough. They have warehouses they have to empty out. They want to please take free shipping, no tax, we'll deliver, we'll install free, anything. Get this stuff out of my warehouse. People don't have the money. And the catch is always, it's interest free. 5 years, you can pay off this thing for $50, 5-year financing, whatever the case may be. You wind up paying $300 for it. I'm exaggerating. I know I'm exaggerating, but you get my point. And at that point, people are broke. Factories are closed. Now, what happens when a factory closes? Right? People lose their jobs. Now, there's more people not working than were working the day before. When people are out of jobs, they go for unemployment. Where does unemployment money come from? Well, it's got to come from me. I mean, we got to put into the unemployment fund. I mean, it doesn't come from nowhere, but there is none. So the government starts printing more money. Eventually, we'll come to a point where a dollar will become pretty valuable for a short period of time. Now, listen carefully. This is my prediction. I think the dollar will, so save some dollars, because it'll come to a point where people don't have enough dollars to do anything. And I'm saying this is going to happen within the next couple of years, where if you have a dollar, you'll be able to buy a lot. Why? Because they're stacked up in a warehouse. Something that would have cost $45, the guy would be more than happy to sell it to you for $15. An indication of this, a small indication, is a dollar store. How many items you see in that dollar store that at one time you saw at a regular store for not 50 cents more, several times the price? I love going to the dollar store because there's always something I can find. I said, oh, this used to be $6.99. Now I can get it for $1. So we're not talking about 50 cents. We're talking about 7 times cheaper. This is the pressure. In fact, even Walmart has gone to the dollar store concept. They have aisles that are dollar store aisles now because they literally have been losing customers. And their sales are down. Their sales are down because people don't have the money. Even with the credit cards and even with SNAP, the Supplemental Nutritional Food Program, nutrition program, I guess it's called. Anyway, so you have people with less money, fewer people working, fewer people to work with. Now, what is the government going to do? Well, all of a sudden, you'll come to a point. Now, this is my prediction. This is all my prediction, right? And I'm not saying this is exactly what's going to happen, but if you have money, you're going to be able to buy stuff. You see, I want to buy that Lamborghini. But Lamborghini is a silly item because the only people who buy Lamborghinis are multi-godzillionaires, and those people are never going to go broke. But if I wanted to go out and buy a car, I'll be able to go out and buy a car for a fraction of the cost. Why? They have to take it off the lot, and I'm one of the few people who actually has money. Now, when it comes to a point where the government is in the same boat as the manufacturers. In other words, they have tremendous debt. We're going to be looking at $19 trillion possibly by the end of this year. Close to $19 trillion in debt. And that's the unfunded debt is another, depending on who you speak to. If you speak to Professor Kutlakoff, which I have, at the University of Boston, you're talking close to $250 trillion. Now, folks, let me convert that. That's $1/4 of $1 quadrillion. That's your long-term debt. That's like going to a bank and getting $50,000 loan, and you got to pay $10,000 a year. $10,000 a year. And someone says, how much you owe the bank? You say $10,000. No, you owe $50,000 plus interest. And this is what we do. We say, what's our debt? Oh, it's $18.2 trillion. No, it's not. That's the current debt. What's your overall debt? Well, it's closer to $200 trillion. All right? You understand that? So the government's going to say, the government's not going to be getting any money because people are not working. And where does government get their revenue from? Right? Productivity. If productivity goes down, tax revenues go down. Tax revenues go down, the government is still borrowing money. They're increasing the debt, and they have to pay it. They have to turn these bonds over. Where are they going to get the money from? They don't have it. They have less today, less money coming in, and more debt. So as a result, eventually they'll come to a point where they say, all right, we have to start the printing presses. This is where we go from a deflationary depression where the dollar sounds strong because people who have dollars can do things, to the government printing so much money to make that debt so cheap that they can pay it off. And that's where you go through hyperinflation. So we're going to go through this deflationary depression. Now, we didn't do this during the Depression because we were on the gold standard. And you couldn't print money because you're on the gold standard. You had to have some relationship between the number of dollars out and gold. Now we have nothing. Our dollars are worth nothing. I give speeches every once in a while, and one of my favorite tactics is that I go out to the audience and I introduce myself. I have a few fun things that I talk about, and I joke around with the audience. Then I ask someone in the audience. I said, May I see someone raise their hand who has a very, very expensive watch? Don't give me this Timex stuff. I mean a real expensive watch. And now somebody always raises their hand, and I say, may I see it? And I take it from them. Now, I go to the dollar store and I buy a dollar watch. A dollar watch, right? And I go, this is nice. I put it on, and I give them the dollar watch. The guy said, well, where's my watch? I said, I gave you a watch back. The guy said, wait a minute, that watch cost me $500. I said, well, that cost me $1. It's equal trade. He said, how do you see that? I said, well, wait, does your watch do the same thing my watch does? He says, yes. I said, no problem. He says, mine's worth something. I said, then why didn't you complain when we went off the gold standard? When the government said, when we went from the silver coins to copper coins, if you say, oh, there's no problem, makes no difference, then my dollar watch should have no more value than your Rolex. Now, we are no longer a Rolex society. We are a dollar store society. In fact, one of my favorite watches, and I found this actually at Grand Lake, it was a Star Wars watch, and it worked. It's a plastic Star. I'm sure it was a dollar watch, I still have it home. And every time I don't wear it, every time it dies, I put a new battery in it. I don't know why I do that, But I want you to see where we're going. We have fewer people producing. Now, what happens when you have fewer people producing, and then you have another ingredient, and this other ingredient is the number of people who are relying on the productive people for survival. Remember our little village, right? Let's assume instead of having 50 elderly people, now you have 75 elderly people, right? But instead of having 200 people productive, you have 100 people productive. You see, you're shrinking the wrong end and you're elongating the other. They say, what's your life? I say, I'm going to live forever. I mean, just think, folks, just think of life Just think of the world without Joe Cristiano. Can't happen. I'm going to aggravate everybody forever. And that's my mentality. I will be here I tell you, I'm going to start projecting out my programs for the next 200 years. I'm going to go on a 200-year cycle, Well, that's the way I think. And quite frankly, if you think that way, you live longer. Now, if I live longer, back in the old days, why did they give Social Security at 65 or 62? You know why? They weren't stupid. Because you died before that. People didn't live to 65. Very few people did. So they collected this money and they said, gotcha. You ain't going to get it because you're going to die beforehand. And now what happens? I know people in their 80s that are going like gangbusters. They're going windsurfing at 80 years old, all right? And they're collecting Social Security. I've been collecting Social Security now for 6 years. No, 5 years now. 5 years, right? I already broke the bank, and I have another 5 years. I have another 140 years to go. Man, who's going to make that money? Who's going to produce that money? There ain't nobody. There ain't nobody, okay? And if you understand that, you'll see where we're going eventually. Now, I'm not predicting the stock market's going to crash today and it's going to go up the Wednesday. None of that. I want you to see where we are going, and it's all a matter of demographics. And we won't get out of this malaise for 5 or 10 years, maybe 10 years, until everything readjusts. But only if the government eventually gets out of the way. And that will be revolutionary. And it may cause a revolution. It may be a revolution. We may say after our currency collapses, we'll lose total faith in the government and maybe restore the Constitution. Now, I know that's good news, but it's far, far away from now, and there'll be a lot of suffering between now and then. Take heed for those companies that say, hey, maybe you should have some food supplies in the house. Buy it now because now it's cheap. I've noticed that the companies that sell long-term storage food are selling everything at half price. Everything. I can buy anything at half price. These cans of freeze-dried food that's normally, $42, they're selling it for $21 or $25. Now, you think food, items such as that, would be going up in price, but they're not because people don't have money to buy it. They're moving out. It's like the car. They're trying to move it out. So I'm buying that now because it's a drop-dead deal. I'm getting money in, and I'm spending money. I'm paying half as much for food that I may need in the future that'll cost me 5 times as much. You see? But it all takes a mentality to think that, I always keep myself positive, so everything will be wonderful. Well, I think everything will be wonderful, but let me tell you something. It's going to be wonderful for me because I'm planning for it. Those people who are la-la and say, they go through life as they always have, thinking that what happened in 1910, 1940, 1960, 1980, and today is all the same, those people are going to be hurting. These are the people who are knocking on your door and say, excuse me, may I have some food, And they're going to say, no, you should listen to my radio program and you should have taken heed, Go out there and be positive. You can live on being positive, right? I have no patience with these people. But I want you to know that this is where we're going. This is the United States. Just look around you. Look at all the indicators, every single indicator. Now, most economic indicators are still going up. That's because the government is pumping money into the system, keeping things going. But it's starting to backflush. We have no job growth. We have the productive part of our society being unproductive. We have debt. Personal debt is beyond imagination in the trillions of dollars. And I know many people who are exactly in that position. And quite frankly, I don't feel sorry for them. They go to school, they take a degree in some college that you never heard of before that has no standing whatsoever, and they get a degree in sociology, and they wonder why they can't get a job as a sales manager. Come on. And I blame the schools as well. The schools are the worst places in the world to be in, to go to for advice. Because they should have counselors, and they say, What are you taking a degree in sociology? What are you going to do? Become a sociologist? We got 14 million sociologists out of work. What are you going to do with it? No, they go, oh, that's wonderful. Here's your bill. $65,000. Start paying it. The school system is not your friend. Become a diesel mechanic. You'll make some really good money. In fact, years ago, if you went to Okmulgee Tech and got a degree in diesel mechanics, right? The diesel companies like Cummins and those in Detroit would come to Okmulgee Tech in their corporate jets, pick you up to wine and dine you, show you their factory, and I believe at that time they started at $55,000 a year. And they begged you to work there. Benefits. That's productivity, folks. Okay, folks, I think this is the end of today's program. Let's play a little. This is the end of today's broadcast. We'd like to thank our sponsors for the financial support, and we'd like to thank you for listening in. You can further the cause of liberty by recommending this program to your friends and let us hear from you. Our email address is comments@libertytalkradio.com. Remember, folks, you're either allowing your liberties to be taken away or you're striving to protect them. Unfortunately, there is no middle ground. With that, until next time, I'm Joe Cristiano. This is Liberty Talk Radio. Stay well. Stay tuned.